Today, how many of you have ever played the game of pretend before? Don't lie, all of you have. And boys, men, how many of you can relate with this? Is this not the best stick ever? The best one. I would love finding sticks, trying to find like the perfect one. It's light, it's long, it's in the perfect shape of a sword. I think any little thing, I'm going to put it back on here because it's a big sword. Any little thing that a child can find that they can turn into a toy, whether it's a rock, a stick, a bundle of blankets that they can make into a baby. If they look out on a tree or a hammock and can pretend like it's a pirate ship, like in this picture here, anything that they can imagine when their minds are free to explore, it makes them feel like life is full. I watch my child, 3 years old almost now, and she's just loving life. Anything is a toy now, and not everything should be a toy, right? No. But everything is a toy, and I watch that little smile on her face pop up, and she's just loving life. The sweetness of life is so real for her. But friends, when does this game of pretend and imagination start to fade away? Any guesses? It's nice if it continues. Here's the thing. Often, we find that our imagination starts to slow down or die down when we gain more and more responsibilities. You start getting homework as a kid, and you have to study all the time, and you have less time to enjoy the things that you really like to do. You start a job, and you got the 8 to 5 or the 9 to 5, whatever you have, some going all night, and you sleep during the day. And we're going to have a lot of buzzing today. But we see that Monday through Friday, or even if you work on the weekend, it just seems like the cyclical nature of continuous adult busy work. Things continue to go and go and go. The reality of the consistent basis of all the things that we have to do start to pile up, so much so that we start to become mired by life. We start developing this mentality that we're just living this dream and trying to coast from one side to the next. We swap child's play for adult busy work. And in that adult busy work, you have to start questioning, what are you doing all this busy work for? For some of it, it's to make more money, to buy a better house, to buy a better car, to get the next best thing. It's the desire for gain and a lasting legacy to do something that matters. But here's the question. How many of you have changed jobs before? Yeah? Have you ever gone back to that job? Not as like going back to work there, but just to visit. Have you ever done that before? How many people remember you? Get removed from a couple years, nobody you know that works there anymore. How many people remember you? It gets tough. But we like to pretend that gain is something that we are going to constantly be fulfilled by. This game of pretend, it doesn't end. It just changes from a child's play to adult busy work. We want permanence where it doesn't exist. We want something to feel like it's going to last. We want something to feel like it's going to make us feel whole. And then we also want to change the things that cannot be controlled. We want to remove all the things that are hurting and wrong and just have just enough joy to make it from one point to the next. So at the end of the day, we're left sweating and toiling to make believe that the natural seasons and cycles are these natural seasons and cycles, as they are content to come and go. As all of this happens, we try to imagine and pretend like something is different. The author of Living Life Backwards quotes it like this. He says, let's pretend to get the promotion, or to see our church grow, or to bring up good children. We'll feel significant and leave a lasting legacy behind us. Let's pretend that if we change jobs or emigrate to the sun, I don't suggest that, we won't experience the humdrum tedium and ordinariness of life. Let's pretend that if we move to a new house, we'll be happier and we'll never want to move again. Let's pretend that if we end one relationship and start a new one, we won't feel trapped. Let's pretend that if we get through this week's pile of washing and dirty diapers and shopping lists and school runs and busy evenings, next week will be quieter. I can tell you that's a myth. Let's pretend that time is always on our side to do the things that we want to do and become the people that we want to be, and let's pretend that we can break the cycle of repetition and finally arrive in a world free from weariness. It's a lot. And I think Ecclesiastes 1 through 11 is going to help us to acknowledge the bigger picture. Life is a huge picture, and we get caught up only looking at the small things, so much so that everything becomes mixed and confused. So the big idea for today is that we find gain in God rather than the strain of chasing the wind. I had this image in my head when I was thinking of this like chasing the wind kind of deal. It's kind of like this image of just a little bit of mist. You can't really catch it, can you? Can't put it in your pocket. I remember as a kid I would go out with my friends and we would try to chase fog. Look for all that dense fog and it would be gone like that. Doesn't last. But the gain is in God rather than the mentality of trying to catch and hold on to the things that are temporary. So the big idea ultimately for this whole series is that when you trust in Jesus, life is fully lived backwards. And here's how the author sets this up. First two verses of Ecclesiastes 1 through 11 says this: "These are the words of the teacher, King David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem." He says, everything is meaningless. Completely meaningless. Anybody feel edified and super encouraged? When you look at the word in Hebrew, what it literally is like 4 times saying the word hevel. It's like hevel, 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 which is another way of just saying it's absolutely, completely, and utterly meaningless. But the word isn't just about the idea of being meaningless. A lot of translations will stick with just that idea. Some will try to get in the middle and say, it's absurdity. It's vanity. To over-focus on life, it's just vanity. And, vanity is just a funky way of saying, life is something wishy-washy. I don't think that's quite what it's getting at. It's more like, again, this mist. It's over and it's gone. It feels like a thief. Like time feels like a thief. It goes so immeasurably quick. My children are a constant reminder of this. I even think a couple weeks ago, I turned 33 years old. And I'm like, where did that time go? I was just in school for like 22 years. Went to 10 years worth of college, and it's like, is this ever going to end? And I get out, and I've already been dating and married to my wife for 7 years. And it's like, where did this time go? My child is now almost 3 years old. I have a second child, and it's like, gone. And I keep getting reminded by so many different people, hang on to those moments, those children that are screaming, you're going to miss those days. It's like, okay. But it's like a yes and a no kind of thing. Because, again, time's a thief. It just moves so fast. And it takes a lot of effort to try to slow down enough to say, let's cherish these moments. Because you're caught up in everything else at the same time. And I think what the author is trying to stress inside of these first 2 verses is addressing when you're stuck in this tedium of life, when you're going so fast, it's hard to even slow down and enjoy those small moments. Author of Psalms 103 says, "Our days on earth are like grass, like wildflowers. We bloom and die, and wind blows and we are gone, as though we have never been here." And it just goes fast. Best times that you can get for remembering when you were a child are probably photographs, right? You look back at your Snapchat stories, your Facebook memories. You look back at your parents when they did scrapbooks. How many of your parents did that? Mine did. So I still got some old books where I'm able to see just some memories that I don't really remember very well anymore because time has already gone up to this point. But this is what the author is inviting us to, just trying to help us to see these moments matter. But then he escalates it, and he goes right into the third verse saying, what do people get for all their hard work under the sun? What's the point of all the hard work, folks? Why do you work so hard? What motivates you to keep going? What are your short and long-term goals? Anybody have a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year, 20-year goal? Oh, they're so hard. I hated interview questions where they ask that. It's like, do you know what you're going to do in the next minute, in the next month, in the next year? It's like, I don't know. Just give me the job. But then you're thinking, what legacy are you hoping to leave behind? And as you start to wrestle with all of these questions, it's like that image where you're trying to push a boulder up a hill and it just feels harder and harder. You're just sweating and toiling. And it just feels like so much. Life just feels immense. We want this image where we're just pressing forward and everything just goes smooth. We get that good job. We get that good life, good house, good relationship, and everything presses on just the right way, but so quickly it turns into that. The longer and harder that we press on, the more and more variables that pop up. School's tough. Work's tough. Family life is tough. Friends get tough. The more harder and harder you try to take control of everything, the more it feels like things just slip through your fingers. And we see that life is repetitive. It's cyclical rather than linear. In verses 4 through 10, it says this: generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises and the sun sets, but then hurries around to rise again. The wind blows south and then turns north. Around and around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out again to the sea. Everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. History merely repeats itself. It has been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here is something new. But actually it is old. Nothing is ever truly new. Does anybody remember that first phone on the screen there? The brick phone? Anybody even remember like the suitcase phones that you would put in your car? Anybody remember beepers? Dad had a beeper. I remember it was annoying. It would buzz all the time. He had his own business, and I just remember like that was a distinct memory. And then slowly we started getting more evolutions of different kinds of phones. My first phone was probably that like third or fourth phone on that list. It was small, compact. It was a little flip phone. Got it in like 2008. And then the phones changed. You started getting bigger and bigger screens. And the things started to develop into, it seemed like bigger and greater inventions. They seemed brand new. You think every year they come out with a new iPhone. Every year they come out with a new Android, right? It's the next biggest and greatest thing, right? Anybody keep up with all the phones? No? That's okay. But, like, they make it seem, when you look at the advertisements, like it's the best thing ever. Put another camera on the back. You get 50 cameras on the back, and it's going to make the best picture, right? I always find it, like, it used to just be one camera, now it's like 5. Little circles all over. But, like, there's this desire that we have innately to find something that is new, something that will take the edge off just enough to feel like we will be satisfied long term. But even, particularly with phones, they don't last long, do they? You could try to make them last, but it starts slowing down, becoming inept. It starts becoming something that just doesn't work like it's supposed to. Particularly iPhones, I hear, don't last more than a year or two. And then you're on to the next $1,000-some purchase. This is the kind of thing that we're experiencing. Everything becomes cyclical. Everything becomes a desire to find something that will last. But life keeps moving on even though we can't hold it. It's that mist that just disappears so quick. And this is where the author invites us. He says, in a very bold statement, because nobody wants to think about this, prepare to die, right? Anybody feel edified? No. It sounds daunting, because one of the things that people do not like to think about in life is death. But when he says in the third verse, what are we doing with all this hard work when we're under the sun? We're trying so hard to get to a certain point, and then at the end, what does it amount to? Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15:32, I fought wild beasts in Ephesus, and if I fought wild beasts in Ephesus with no more than human hopes, what have I gained? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. If you have no hope in God, if you have no hope that is lasting and eternal, the best thing to do that is quoted from these philosophers in the area that Paul is quoting is just eat and drink and pretend like everything's fine, right? Pretend like everything's okay. Mask it over. Don't worry about death. You'll get there one day, but it's not your problem until you get there. And then there's this opposite idea. I used to never find appeal in these games. I don't know if you've heard of the game Dark Souls before. Naturally going to quote a video game. It's been integral for my childhood, but I've seen a lot from this. And if you look up this particular game, you'll see one of two things. One, it is an absurdly hard game. It's not fair. Not at all. It never gets easier. No matter what point of the game, it is always hard, and the developers have specifically stated it is a game that is designed to make you quit. Sounds like a great game, right? But there's another thing. If you look up on YouTube, there are people that will make claims that this game is something that has healed them, that has saved them from their depression and their anxiety. And it's specifically due to this philosophical idea that it promotes self-efficacy. They build this idea that if I can conquer this thing that is unfair and too hard for me, I can translate that into real life. And constantly, you see all these testimonies online of people saying, I conquered all these great and terrible things in this game, and now I can take on this job, or this test, or this relationship, or my family members that have been distant from me for a time, and they feel like they've been healed enough to face the next challenge. I think it's a really interesting idea, and honestly, it works for a time. It works for a short time, though. It is a temporary fix. There's another story that came up pretty recently, I think at the beginning of June. There's a man named Michael Baumer. Found out that he's terminally ill with colon cancer. He doesn't have long to live. And one of his favorite things to do is spend time in evenings talking with his wife, and his wife would ask him all kinds of questions, and the wellspring of knowledge that he was able to answer those questions, or at least explore it with her. And what his wife reported was, the thing that I will miss the most is asking him questions whenever I wanted to, because she appreciated that wisdom. Awesome. So what he wanted to do was specifically gift her with his voice in an AI form. So this AI program collected his voice long enough to be able to reproduce any answer that would come essentially from Google or an AI program and talk in his voice. And this serves as like a grief-related program, but the question is, is it helpful? Is it something that lasts? It's a temporary fix to a greater issue when we're not prepared to die, when we're not prepared to face all the difficulties of life. Self-efficacy can only get you so far, just as pretending away the problem can only get you so far. one more story just because this is great. Any of you ever heard of the Winchester Mystery House? Okay. I heard about this pretty recently, and it is fascinating. In San Jose, California, this massive house. It's 160 bedrooms, 47 fireplaces, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors. Massive house. Huge. It was built by the surviving widow of the Winchester gun manufacturer. Sarah Winchester built this, and she believed that she was haunted by the spirits of those who were killed by her husband's guns. So she went to a local shaman and said, "What do I do? How do I get rid of these spirits?" And the suggestion was, you got to build more. Just keep building, never stop building. So she never stopped building for 38 years. Huge house. And it got more and more absurd. You would see on the bottom portion of the screen, there's stairs that lead to nowhere. There's windows that would just peer into other rooms. There are open walls or doors that would open just straight into a wall. It was built like a labyrinth with secret passages, hidden compartments, and confusing layouts to confuse and trap the presumed spirits that were trying to haunt her. And what I find really interesting about this, when you think about this idea of self-efficacy, is the things that we think work in the moment in our lives end up becoming something like this house. We put more and more stuff in our life in order to take away from the feeling that we are toiling hard, that we're doing too much, that we have this impending death coming. We milk this big, magnificent structure in your life, and it just turns into something confusing, like a big labyrinth. What I want to encourage you with this is not sustainable. The author of Ecclesiastes is purporting that this is not a sustainable way to live. In 1 Corinthians 15, 20 through 28, it says this: "But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. But each in turn, Christ the first fruits. Then, when he comes, those who belong to him. Then the end will come, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father, after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power. For he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death, for he has put everything under his feet. Now, when it says that everything has been put under him, it is clear that this does not include God himself, God himself who put everything under Christ. When he has done this, then the Son himself will be made subject to him who put everything under him, so that God may be all in all." All this to say is, our greatest enemy is death. You've probably heard it said that there's two things promised in life: death and taxes, right? You're not going to get out of one or the other. And I know taxes are immense right now, and you probably feel that more than death. What 1 Corinthians 15 is trying to say is that death, even though it is our greatest enemy, does not have the last word. When we place our faith in Jesus, we are not stuck in this nihilistic existentialism, which just is saying, all this, is what it is. I'm just going to get there, and I'm just going to coast through life, and everything's going to be fine until it isn't. Death does come to the believer and the non-believer alike. We all live under the sun, and yes, death is the last enemy. But the one who places their faith in Jesus has a different kind of hope. They have something akin to God efficacy. You are efficient because you place your faith in God, because you place your faith in Jesus, who has conquered sin and death, who took on the punishment that was meant for you on the cross, paying the penalty for all sins that you think, say, and do. When he leaves that on the cross, when that is left in death, when that is defeated, you experience Christ's victory when you trust in him. We may still die a natural death one day. The faith that we have in Jesus gives us hope that supersedes the cyclical nature of this world, we have a different perspective when we place our faith in Jesus. This is the idea of living backwards. Okay? The idea of living backwards means that you trust in the fixed point that you are victorious in Jesus. And anything past up to where you are present now. I mean, here's a question. Any of you like spoilers in movies or stories? I actually do. I might be kind of weird. But here's the thing. I like knowing the ending because it encourages me to hear the rest of the story. Because it's like, how did you get there? The end of the story, friends, that goes into the rest of the story into the future and in eternity beyond is found in the victory of Christ. When you place your faith in Jesus, when you place your faith in everything that he's done on the cross and him rising from the grave 3 days later, defeating sin and death, that, when you place your faith there, you're already in victory. You are already living that eternal life now. Everything past that point, when you are here in this present room, is a journey up to that victory. You're living in that victory. You are living backwards. It's a beautiful thing. I read this devotional this morning from Alistair Begg, and I thought it was appropriate just to share with you for a moment. He quotes from 2 Corinthians 12. He says, "We're often tempted to try to make out that we're better than we really are, thinking that if we could just present a good front, then people would be impressed and drawn to listen to the message we carry. But what we should seek more than anything is for people to be drawn to Christ. And nothing exalts and magnifies Christ quite like our testimony that God's grace is sufficient and his power is made perfect in weakness. If you are too aware of your flaws, shortcomings, and weaknesses, then you are ready to rejoice with the Apostle Paul, who wrote, 'Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Have you considered the possibility that your personal weaknesses may be the very key to your usefulness in God's hand? He does not need your strength, and he can work with your weaknesses." The difference between self-efficacy, as we talked about before, and God-efficacy is we acknowledge that when we try to control all the things, it's like pushing that boulder uphill. You only get so far before you're sweating and toiling and it rolls right back on you. When you trust in God, even though there are many different directions that go this way and that way, when you know that he has the best plan for you, you are living a much more full and fulfilling life. So we learn to live. How do we do it? The bottom line, friends, is this. Starting in verse 11, it says, "We don't remember what happened in the past, and in future generations, no one will remember what we are doing now." Again, it sounds like it's down and depressing. But what you see with the bottom line is this. When you accept death, it's the first step in learning to live. You stop pretending, because what we try to do is we spend our lives trying to escape the constraints of this condition. We try to escape the feeling like we can mask away and pretend like death is not a big issue. It happens to everyone else but me until it does. Accepting that we are not in control and won't live forever will radically shape us. So it encourages us to no longer pretend. That the more sweat and toil that we make won't change matters. That a fulfilling life is more about understanding that life is a gift, and it's not about trying to gain as much as we can in order to live the best possible life. It's not about just trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? The big idea is this, that we find gain in God rather than trying to strain ourselves by chasing the wind. There is no catching the mist, or for me, catching the fog when I was a kid. It's not going to last. It's not about trying harder. It's about facing reality, knowing that we are not in control, and that God is, and He gives us a truly fulfilling purpose. So there's a handful of questions I'd love for you to explore. If you're trekking along with the book, these are some of the questions that pop up in the book. Think of 3 things that you want to change about your life and 3 things that you want to stay the same. Can you think of instances when you had gained only to find out that in time you were dissatisfied? How can it be liberating rather than frustrating to know that life is repetitive? Do you find the message in Ecclesiastes 1 to be depressing or promising? Why? And as a bonus, what is the difference between viewing life as gain versus viewing life as a gift? To give you a short practice for this week, I was thinking of how to make this applicable, and I find it very ironic. I'm going to have the ushers also come forward at this time for communion. I find it really ironic that every time I prepare a sermon, it feels almost like I am attacked by that very thing that I'm trying to purport. And I felt like this week, it was just constant attacks of trying to control as much as I possibly could. Got health issues from both my wife and myself. I have one kid popping 3 teeth throughout this week, and one practicing potty training, and they both want constant attention. I have church life, I have friend life, I have family life, I have trying to take care of the house, and I couldn't get outside all week to take care of the yard, and it's like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do all this? And I think as I was trying to control more and more and more, just felt like the anger started to rise because I couldn't do everything. And then the depression came where it's like, I can't do everything, and I don't want to be mad at anybody, so I'm just down on myself. And I reached that one point in the middle of the week where it was just so much, I had to stop and say, first, I'm doing too much. And I'll be honest, it took a while to get to this point. It took many mistakes getting to this point. I had to slow down and be still, acknowledging I can't do this. God help me. So I got off my computer as I was preparing this sermon, loaded up my kids in a stroller or a wagon, had my little one try to pull the tiniest one in the wagon, and I just walked along with them. And slowing down and reprioritizing it helped me to see where I was fulfilled the most. It helped me to see this gift versus gain mentality. And it's really funny. When I got home, I had the most productive part of my day happen. I was the happiest, and I was also the most fulfilled because I wasn't trying to control all the things in that moment. That's what I want to encourage you with this week, because you're going to hit those moments, friends. At work, at school, amongst your family and friends, you're going to hit those moments where anger is way up here, or depression is way up here. Slow down, friends. The sweat and the toil is too much for you. And the harder you work, it's not going to prove anything at the end. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't work hard. I'm telling you that life is not about working hard. God gives you greater purpose, and He's inviting you to slow down enough to see that purpose. I'm encouraging you to also equip yourself for the future, because when you face these moments, man, it's great to have a verse come out or a story come out that you remember the example of how God is speaking in and through His Word. When you pull that up, it changes everything.